and Edom were allies. Malchi Yisrael and Edom were allies. And then one day they become enemies. And then by the Churban Beis Hamikdash, Edom is there alongside Buvel, helping out the Babylonians. And then for 2,000 years we're suffering from Edom. But what was the point in history when Edom went from being our brother and friend and ally to becoming our mortal enemy? And there is a story. The story is brought down in the beginning of Meluchim Beis. And it's a story over a war in the middle of many other wars that would have otherwise been skipped over as, oh yes, another time that the Yidden and Moav, haben sich ausgeharrt getan in andere. But this had a very unique plot twist in it. So what happens is, it's right after the death of Achav. Achav has two sons. His first son is king for a little over a year. The second son, Yehoram. So Yehoram wants to go to battle against Moav because Moav is rebelling against Klal Yisrael. And so he's looking for allies. He asks Yeshufat Melech Yehuda, he says, yeah, I'll join you. Then he asks Edom, do you want to join us? Now the Radak says Edom had a very good reason for saying yes, because Moav was holding the son of the king of Edom hostage. And so the Yidden told Edom, let's go together, let's defeat Moav together, and we will rescue your son. And Edom said, no problem. So they show up to the battlefield. There's a story with Elisha Hanuvi, and there's a Ness. Klal Yisrael wipes out Moav. So basically, Moav thought that there was some kind of a fight between, that the Yidden and Edom started killing each other out, because they saw what looked to them like rivers of blood. They thought that the Yidden were killing each other, so they started running to the Yidden's camp to grab everything they can, right? If you think that an enemy totally wiped itself out, what are you going to do? You're going to run to the tents to grab whatever you can that they left behind. So you're not showing up with weapons. So Moav storms the camp completely unarmed, and Klal Yisrael wipes them out like that. The king runs back with his people. They run back to their capital city that's surrounded by a wall, and they hold up the son of the king of Edom on top of the wall for everybody to see. And in the presence of all three kings and their entire armies, they proceed to burn him alive on top of the wall. They burnt him into plaster, is one of the descriptions. And what does Edom say? What does Edom do? As soon as it happens, who does Edom blame? Who wants to guess this one? The Jews. That's right. They blame the Jews. They say, Jews, if not for you guys, my son would still be alive, would still be able to negotiate for him. You guys killed him. And Edom never got over it. And the Nuvi says that this was the lowest point in the history of Klal Yisrael. This was at the tail end of a 4-year drought. There was famine going on. And right at that point is when Ovadia received the Neviah. And so the Eibishter showed Ovadia, he says, Ovadia, things are about to become very, very challenging between the Yidden and Edom. And it's going to be so bad that when the first Beis HaMikdash is going to be destroyed, Edom is going to have a hand in it. And when the second Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, Edom will be the ones to carry it out under their proxy, their shell company, Rome. And then there will be a decisive event before Mashiach that Edom is going to join the wrong side on, and then they're going to get wiped out. So the Eibishter said, I'm showing you this Neviah so you could see what happens to Edom in the end, so that Klal Yisrael can take comfort in knowing that everything we're about to suffer from them for the next 2,000 and, well, Ovadia lived 2,800 years ago, for the next 2,800 years, everything we're about to suffer, you know that there's an end in sight. And so the Eibishter gave Ovadia the Neviah, Ovadia says it, and he brings it to Sanhedrin, Sanhedrin approves it, and this becomes the first Neviah that's written down for future generations. almost all the money just vanished. So this is being exposed right now. So for a while they'll call it colonies. Let's establish colonies and let's educate the savages. Today they call it humanitarian aid, but it's always the same thing. Yishmael doesn't go around to third world countries and pretend to distribute humanitarian aid. China doesn't do that. China buys off debt from countries and takes over. Yishmael takes over their own way. It's only Edom that has this misguided idea of benevolence where they pretend to help everybody out. So, in a present day understanding, Edom is the nation with the inferiority complex. They're the Kutin Bagoyim. How? They go out of their way to be sensitive to all other cultures, but buzi out the moed, everybody laughs at them. They want to help the unfortunate. Everybody mocks them. They allow in migrants from all of the troubled regions, and the migrants only take advantage and are going to end up destroying Edom's countries. And why does Edom do it? They just want to be liked, but nobody likes them. So so how do we know who Edom is? They're the nation that's always trying to win the appreciation of everybody else, and everyone just looks down at them and mocks them. Now, how could such a tiny little nation in Har Sayir suddenly become the most powerful empire in the world? How does that happen? So, the Malbim's to the point where he says, why would it take the entire world to gang up on Edom, and that's the only way they can be defeated? A tiny little sliver on the southwestern, east-western corner of Eretz Yisrael, and they're going to take over the whole world? Your arrogant, overconfident heart misled you. You found yourself living on the tops of cliffs. This was in Har Sayir. And then later, Miroim Shiftoi, from Rome, your seat of power, Zukteklai that Ovadia here was predicting the rise of Rome. Ovadia lived a century before Rome was even founded. And he said, one day there's going to be a place, Rome, and that will be your capital. So Sheikhli B'chag Vesela, high up on the mountain, Miroim Shiftoi, from Rome, your seat of power. And we put I can't go back on this. We put an image of a baby because they're like a baby born on top of a mountain, and they think that their ep is something major because they're on top of the mountain, but they don't realize that they're only on top of the mountain because they were born there, not because of anything special that they themselves did. Same with Edom. Edom didn't do anything special. They're not up as smarter or they're better warriors, let's say, than anybody else. It was a nace that such a tiny country takes over the entire world. So that's the one that got skipped over. It says, you say to yourself, who could possibly destroy me? Rome. Rome lasted 1,000 years. And then East Rome, Byzantium, lasted another 1,000 years. They're like, who could possibly destroy me? Don't get too excited. Wait until you rise up like an eagle. Last week's parasha, there's a medrash that says that Yaakov, the Eibusha showed Yaakov all the gulas, and he showed the gulas where they end. The end of the gulas. But came gulas Edom, and the Maluchim are going and going and going and going and going, and Yaakov Avinu says, when is this going to end? Looked in the Eibusha. When they rise up like an eagle, and they build bases among the stars, from there will they be brought down to their defeat. You notice that the words star and base are highlighted. Earlier this year I had the opportunity to visit Musk's new city in Texas, where he plans to send out those flights to Mars, the gateway to Mars. You know what the name of the city is? Starbase. And among the stars you'll build your bases. He built a city actually called Starbase. And so you look at the words Im usually gets translated into if. But over here it's translated as when. So why doesn't it say Kisha Takbiyah? Why does it say Im Takbiyah? Oh, very good. Okay. Someone had the same Richa Kodesh I did. Or, okay, I like the first try better. Im Takbiyah Kanation, Ila Mosk, Takbiyah Kanation, Ila Mosk, Ben Kechuvim Simkinechu, Misham Eritchunem Hashem. Why? What's the Misham Eretz Chunim Hashem? Why is Musk building? Why does he want to build? He says he wants to have a colony on Mars by 2050. He wants to have 1 million people living on Mars. Why? In case a mass catastrophic event hits Earth, wipes out a big part of Earth, he wants to have a base in Mars. Similar to the idea of Yaakov split the Shvutim into 2 groups. Ovadia. Why was Ovadia Zorchet Neviah? Because when Izebel and Achav were trying to kill out all the Nevi'im, he hid 100 of them in 2 caves, 50 in one, 50 in the other. Why? He got the idea from Yaakov. He said if one cave is discovered, at least the other cave will be able to escape. He spent 2 years. He was a very wealthy man. That's how he got the job working in Achav's palace in the first place. He was very successful in business. He spent all of his personal wealth supporting these Nevi'im for 2 years in a time of famine. Imagine how expensive it must have been. 100 people, 2 years, food, drinking, and he even provided oils. They should be able to learn Torah at night. And the sacrifice that he had to go through to be able to save them was why he, Ovadia Ger Tzedek, from Edom, was able to get that Nevi'ah. So he says, Rome, that's nothing. Wait until the space age. You're going to have nuclear-powered countries. You will have a monopoly on all technology. From that peak of Gava, let's just put 1 million men on Mars so that God can't destroy everybody. So this probably goes into the Be'ita Nachashana. Rabbi Lawrence Hagioff is a renowned expert on the Mashiach aspect. I don't focus on the Mashiach aspect. I focus on the Edom aspect. Like 98% of Yid in the Chitzluitz live under Edom. So it's kedai for us to be aware of what's happening in the world and why. Right? I mean, imagine we had imagine if the people in the times of Megillas Esther had a copy of the Megillas Esther in the middle of the story. Someone discovers a fully finished Megillas Esther with a perish of the Bnei Yissaschar on it, right? And he starts looking and he's like, Homan, I wonder who that could be. Wait, maybe that's Arma Michon. Hey, come here. I found Arma Michon. Look, it talks about Arma Michon. Look, it says, remember last week the king appointed him as, this is him, this is the guy. Imagine how much less stressful the news would have been in the times of Megillah Esther had they had a Megillah, which they didn't. So we today have Nevi'as that were written about the events happening today, so that it should be easier for us to live through the events, right? And part of the Rachmam is that we could actually understand what's happening and why. And that's something very unique to our generation. Now, in every generation, people found Nevi'im. I mean, the last 150 years is all one long story that the Nevi'im wrote about. Like sometimes we think like if something was written about an event that happened 80 years ago, it's not talking about Achras HaYomim. But the whole Achras HaYomim is at least from year Tuf Reish, according to the Zoyed, is when Achras HaYomim starts. So, anyway, Mishom Erit Chunem Hashem. Okay, and how is Edom going to be destroyed? What is going to cause the destruction of Edom? Zuk Denuvi, they will be destroyed in the dumbest way imaginable. Im Ganuva Boilach, when criminals enter your country, Im Shoyde Daylaila. It's interesting that anybody who remembers Trump's first announcement that he's running for president back in June 2015, and it came down the golden escalator. There's one line that if anybody remembers the speech, remembers this one line from the speech, and it's a line he said about Mexico. Mexico sends your people. What kind of people did he say Mexico sends? He mentioned two people, two types of people. Mexico sends criminals, rapists, and some of them I assume are good people. When criminals and rapists enter your country, what are you going to tell yourself? How are you going to justify it in your own head? You think they're coming to loot $900 worth of condoms from a CVS? You think they're coming for your free health care? And then, what's the third category? Some of them, I assume, are good people. You think they're coming as sharecroppers, as laborers. You think they're coming like sharecroppers? They'll steal the ripe grapes and then they'll leave the unripe ones for next time. They're not looking at the grapes. They're looking to destroy the entire vineyard. And you'll know this. You'll know that this is who these people are and this is why they come. But you'll be so arrogant. You'll be, what do you mean? We're the guys with the spaceships. Why should we be scared of a few thousand migrants? And that will be the Zadoin Libchu Ishiachu. You'll be misled by your arrogant heart. Okay. Next pusik. Eich nechbesi eisav nivi matpinav. So the Alshich says there are two ways to learn this pusik. Either how thorough will be Esav's destruction, that even their deepest secrets will be exposed to the public. Another way of reading it is, how will Esav be so thoroughly destroyed that even his deepest secrets are exposed to the public? And the answer is next pusik. It's just a grammatical thing. Both of them work the same way. So, it's interesting that Rabbi Lezer, I don't know, how do you, Rabbi Hajjaf, do you know how to pronounce it? Because in the Hebrew, there's a lamed, Bolgansia. And in French, it's Bourgeanse. Bourgeanse. But for some reason, in the Lashon Kodesh version, there's a lamed in there. Bolgansi. So Rabbi Lezer Bolgansi says, he describes it very interesting. He says, like water that leaks out after it's been exposed to heat. That's how the secrets are going to be exposed, / the treasures are going to be uncovered. The idea being that the people who are going to destroy Esav will have all the time in the world to go through, to dig up, and to find all of his most embarrassing moments and all of his most guarded treasures. The Ganovim, the Shoydei Laila. Yes. Yes. They will destroy them. So in a typical war, you have one side wins, the other side loses, and there's a surrender. In this war, there is not going to be a surrender. They're going to overrun your countries, and they're going to completely wipe you out, and they'll have all the time in the world to find everything. You'll see. It's going to tell you in the next pusuk. Okay. All right. Pop quiz. All right. If you already know the answers, don't say it. If you want to Google it, that's fine. So the first question is, what's the shortish of the word? What does Ukraine translate into in Ukrainian? What does the word Ukraine mean? I'm going to show you where the Russia-Ukraine war is referenced to in Ovadia, and we could probably figure out how the ongoing peace negotiations are going to unfold based on our understanding of this pusuk. Okay? Does anybody know what the word Ukraine means? What is the meaning of the word Ukraine? Okay, I'm gonna. Second one. Is it officially known as Ukraine or the Ukraine? And is there a difference? So think about it. Do people talk about Ukraine or do they say the Ukraine? Okay, it's actually this information could save your life one day. Next, what is the symbolism behind the flag? The flag is right up there. And what is Ukraine's national nickname? What is their nickname? Okay, who wants to take a shot? I guess everybody's already heard one of the previous shiurim, so they don't want to guess. Yes. Which one do you want to answer? Correct. Very good. So the top represents the sky. The gold is the endless open wheat fields. That is the flag. Very good. What does Ukraine mean? And is it Ukraine or the Ukraine? And what is their official national nickname? Anybody? Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Yes. Listen, if we have no choice, then we're going to have to do it that way, yeah. All right, Yankee. Do you know what Ukraine means in English? What does the word Ukraine translate into? You know what? I like your version better. Okay. Ukraine translates into border or frontier. So, to the question of what is their official name, is it Ukraine or the Ukraine, depends on which side of the border you are. If you are Ukrainian, you say, we are country of border. If you're Russian, you say, no, you are the border of my country. Very simple. This is exactly what the whole fight is about. Russia doesn't recognize Ukraine's sovereignty because Ukraine, Kiev, used to be the original capital of Russia. So Russia is they are never going to accept, Ukraine was never an independent country until 1991. For 1,000 years was part of Russia. So if you say the Ukraine in Ukraine, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. If you say Ukraine in Russia, not going to be a pleasant experience. So, what is the national nickname? They're officially known as the bread basket of Europe. Right? Okay. Now, here are the answers. Ukraine means border or frontier. The Ukraine in Russia, Ukraine in Ukraine. The symbolism is the wheat field and the blue sky, and the nickname breadbasket of Europe. And so, the Nubi says, Ad hagvil shlichichu, until the place of border will they lure you out. Hagvil. So it's interesting, and this is what kind of got me thinking along these lines, because I'm like, Ad hagvil shlichichu, what are we talking about? We didn't introduce a border, a line of demarcation, a challenge over, which border is he talking about, unless he's talking about a place called border. Until the place called border will they lure you. Now let's see if the rest of the pusik fits with world events, okay? Because for this pusik to work, every single step is going to have to make sense with the events as we know it, okay? So if I were to ask you first of all, who's he talking to? He's talking to Edom. Which part of Edom? He's talking to the Europe part of Edom. You'll see why in a second. Who lured Europe into this conflict on the border? How did it start? Does anybody remember what it started over? NATO. Very good. And which country was the one that convinced, that basically pushed Russia too far one side and Ukraine too far the other side, that led to this war happening? France. France started this? Biden. Harris specifically, yeah. Harris dangled NATO membership in front of Ukraine. Russia panicked. This was on a trip to, I believe it was Poland. Pretty sure she took a trip to Poland a couple of weeks before the Russian invasion, and she said something like flippantly, yeah, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea for Ukraine to, okay, so who lured them out to the border? Harris. Who's Harris representing? The United States. Kol anshe brisachu. Anshe brisachu. It could be the people of a treaty, or anshe brisachu, anshe abris. If anshe abris is the United States, then who's anshe abris? The American people. Kol anshe abris, the 50 United States. So adak vil shlichichu, they're going to lure you out to the border. Who? Kol anshe brisachu, the 50 United States. Hishiichu, and then they will abandon you. Vayuka melachuda sheshalo Yuda, as Joseph, and they are going to abandon you in this conflict. Hishiichu, they will abandon you, or you will be misled. It's hard for me to see some of the fonts over here. Yeah, the color, and sort of turned off that part of it. So. That's it. Nah. Yeah, also. Okay, so they will lull you into a false sense of security, and you'll be like, you're not going to be concerned about this because, like, America's involved over here. But then Hishiyachu. That will be, you'll be misled. Next, Yachliluchu Anshe Shlemechu. You will be overcome by the Anshe Shlemechu. Notice that Anshe Shlemechu doesn't say Kol Anshe Shlemechu. Kol only says about Kol Anshe Brisechu. So the Anshe Shlemechu, apparently he's talking about a different group of people. And who are these Anshe Shlemechu? Let's be literal. Yachliluchu, who is going to overcome Edom? Anshe Shlemechu. Who are the people who live for the destruction of the patriarchy? Down with the bourgeoisie. The Anshe Shlemechu, the people of the peace activists. They want to destroy the West just like Yishmael wants to destroy the West, and that's the only thing they have in common. Their shared hatred for Western civilization. Yachliluchu Anshe Shlemechu, the people of the peace will get the better of you. So how? How are the people of the peace? What role are they playing? They're telling you that you have to allow these dangerous migrants into your country for the sake of peace. Otherwise you're a fascist. And you can't expel the radical ones because then you're a fascist. And you have to disarm your police force because otherwise you're a fascist. And you have to stand up to Putin because otherwise we will call you a fascist. So the Anshe Shlemechu are going to put you in such a bind that you're not going to be able to crawl out of. So Yachliluchu Anshe Shlemechu, and who else? Besides the Anshe Shlemechu, who else is going to join forces with the Anshe Shlemechu? Lachmechu, and the people of the bread. So the people of the bread could mean a few things. It means the people that live off of your, they get their substance from you. That is people living off of programs. So that could be talking about the migrants. It could be talking about the people that you look down on. The people that you felt were so inferior, you would devour them like bread. Shabbos Vol Hirsch. The people who you invited into your own house and they shared bread around your same table. And Lachmachu, the breadbasket of Europe. You see how each of these pshutim is a different way of understanding the same exact thing that's unfolding right now. Whether Lachmachu means the Ukrainians or Lachmachu means the migrants that are living off of your sustenance, it all paints the same picture, because together you see they will be like a wound inside of you or a trap beneath you. What's the trap? What does the trap look like? Europe has two choices. Do you send your army to the Ukrainian border, like France and the UK have started mobilizing, send your troops to the border of Ukraine to intimidate Putin from invading past Ukraine, but then you leave your cities unguarded? Or you keep your soldiers in town, and then Putin could steamroll Europe. So either way, you will be trapped. Ain't tevina boy. You will not figure out a solution to this problem. Or another way of looking at ain't tevina boy, the nation that is going to destroy you will be a nation that does not have any societal contributions. They don't have any culture or any brilliance. They will be the dumbest rung of society, the lowest class of people, and they will be the ones to destroy you because you were so arrogant that you let them into your land. All right. I said this is the first time I'm showing it in public, so this is the beta version. The White House is going to get the final version. I mean, look, I showed you in Pusik High how the words are almost identical to the words that Trump used coming down the escalator. Trump never learned this. He doesn't need to be told, and he can't even handle the one perek of this TLDR Sefer. So he knows what he needs to know, and everything is going according to plan. Haloi b'yom hinem Hashem, a day approaches, says Hashem. And here is where the events of Achros Hayomim begin. Everything up until now plays out over decades. It started a few decades ago. It also is a recurring theme. It happened in the times of the Roman Empire. It's already happened in the past. Har Sayir was destroyed after the first Beis HaMikdash. Rome was destroyed after the second Beis HaMikdash. And we're up to the third event where Edom is destroyed, and then we rebuild the third Beis HaMikdash. So that's where we're holding, and from this day, this is when things start to unfold rather rapidly. The leaders of Edom will be lost, and all knowledge will be terminated from Har Isav, from the coalition of Isav. He says, what is this Tvina Har Isav? Now keep in mind, the B'nai Sascha was nifter. Is anybody random trivia? Which year was the B'nai Sascha nifter? Either the Yiddish year or the English year, either one. Anybody? You can look it up if you're fast enough. The B'nai Sascha was nifter in 1841. The Zohar says that year Tuf Reish is when the Meyunis of Chachma are going to open and all the wisdom is going to come down to the world. Tuf Reish was 1840. B'nai Sascha was nifter a few months later. What happened that year? The invention of the telegram. The invention of the telegram, some people cite that as the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Some people go back to the textile mills in New England. Some people go back to the invention of the steam engine. The Industrial Revolution started around then. Zukte B'nai Sascha. All of the Chachmas Achitzonis is going to come down only to Edom. Edom will have a monopoly in all the Chachmas Achitzonis. He's saying this before it happened. He's nifted right when it's about to start. He says all the Chachmas Achitzonis will come down to Edom. And Edom, let's do it inside, for those who have the cheating edition. Page Chuf Zayin. No. Page Chuf Tes. V'hine Omer Chachma me'Edom et vina my Har Isav. Right column. Dehine Tirish Amri Razal im Yoimrilchu Udam ein Chachma be'Edom al Tamen. If someone says there's no Chachma be'Edom, don't believe him. All the Chachmas Achitzonis will come down only to Edom. Taida. All the nations can only get Chachma through Edom. If you wonder why Islam is still in the 7th century, and why Africa is still in the 7th century BC, and why China always copies and steals but they can't innovate, it's because all of the Chachmas Achitzonis is only going to come down to Edom. And the rest of the world can't get Chachma except through Edom. It's as if Edom has a tap and they decide who gets Chachma and who doesn't. You're born in a village in Bangladesh, tough. You want to be a doctor? You got to get a degree from a Western university. That's how it works. You can't be accepted as anybody with knowledge without Edom's approval. And if Edom does not like your nation, they don't share anything with you. And if they do like your nation, they'll give you everything for free. So, what is Edom going to do with all this leverage? He says, V'taida, and know this. Klulis kol imis nikris har. When it says Har Isav, Itvina me Har Isav, what is the Har Isav? He says the coalition of all the nations in the world is called the Har. Edom is going to use their leverage to create a coalition of all the nations. Why does the Bashefer need that all the nations should be in a coalition? So he says Har begematria Edom Buvel Yuvon Mudai, and we have a Kabbalah that all of these nations have to be judged together when Mashiach sits in judgment over them. So they're going to form a coalition of all the nations. So this way, all of the nations of Edom and Buvel and Yuvon and Mudai are all included. And all of their allies from all the Gulases are all in the same room together. And he says further that Velia samashpir begdishu midas hashulaim v'hinei zelim is bechinas hashpur the edab yasoin shulam nikra Isav begmatri shulam. Isav is begmatri shulam, but it's a fake shulam. It's not a real shulam. So the United Nations pretends that we have world peace, and they're like, look, any country that has a problem, instead of going to war, you just show up to the podium and you talk it through. They live in this fake non-existent bubble of peace. Meanwhile, who carries the most weight at the UN? It's mostly dictatorships and authoritarian regimes that are using it to protect themselves. So, who are they? Ganuvim, Shoydei Laila, the worst countries. You allowed them into your United Nations. You let them in. And you said, I'm too powerful. There's nothing they can do. But you know what? Now they outnumber you. Now they outnumber you, and very soon they're going to be at an advantage over you, and they don't have the same values that you have. They will use it against you. Okay. So in this one little piece, he helps make sense of the last 150 years of history. The Industrial Revolution, the League of Nations, all the way to the United Nations, and to this day. And the fact that they're the Scheiner Shulim and everything. And then one day, all of a sudden, this Tevina is going to cease. Academia, media, the whole expert class, everything lost its value. People don't take experts seriously anymore. People don't trust institutions. Everything has lost its value. So Avadati Chachoma Me'edom, we can even touch Avadati Chachoma Me'edom, the leaders of Edom are going to lose their minds. It's Vina Maharaisov. If you look at it, however you look at whether it's Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or Tim Walz or Donald Trump or Elon Musk, you look at all these people, they're not people that in any other generation would have been considered leadership material. There is a dearth of Chachma Me'edom, it's Vina Maharaisov, and people prefer it that way. People don't want someone who's polished and smooth talking to lead them. Right, AI also, we stopped innovating, we now rely on AI to do everything, of course. Your warriors will panic and flee south. So Zuk de Malbim, now is when Pusik Aleph happens. At this point, by the Avadati Chachoma Me'edom with Vina Maharaisov, at that phase is when Yishmuel sends around the message V'tzir B'goyim Shilach that says, let's wipe them out, they're vulnerable. But what happens before that? And then so you could either look at it as, see, look at that headline from the AP, like no one even noticed, and it was such a major event for an hour and a half. U.S. Navy faces its most intense combat since World War II against Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels. For an hour and a half, Motzei Shabbos, Pashas Vayishlach, 2 years ago, the Motzei Shabbos, 67 days after October 7th. 67 is Begematria Bina. B'nai Tzachar says that this is going to come out of the Shoresh of Bina. Don't ask me how I stumbled across it. But it was 67 days after October 7th. And the largest naval battle took place since World War II. It lasted an hour and a half until Joe Biden gave the order to disengage and to relocate. Which direction did they all run? They ran south. So most Mefarshim touch it as south. Given the benefit of knowing what's happening in the world, we can very much assume that it's talking about Yemen, and that the word Vachatoi is a reference to the Houthis, because, as the B'nai Tzachar points out in his first shtickle, because Ovadia heard and saw the Nevi'ah simultaneously, that means that Hashem showed him the letters, and he even told him the pronunciation of the letters, which means that the order of the letters can't be changed. So he showed him V'chati Geberecho Taiman, he showed him an event involving the Houthis, the Geberim of Taiman. So why are they going to panic? Zuk de Malbim, that throughout history, Edom will have a giant global military presence, and up until this point, and then suddenly they're going to forget how to use it, and they're going to forget how to win wars. The first example that we saw this in recent history was the Houthis. They can't figure out a solution to the Houthis. Right? Trump does 1,200 to 1,500 airstrikes, and then he's like, all right, now let's make peace. And the Houthis are like, right? I don't want peace. I want to. That's okay. We're going to do peace now. I want to keep fighting. What are you talking about? And yet, he's like, okay, that's it. So both Trump and Biden acknowledge that they don't know what to do about this Houthi problem. And then why? Lemani Kudis Ish Mehad Aisav. so that every last warrior from the coalition of Isaf can be cut down, mikutel. The basic pshat of understanding what this pusuk is talking about, not in the Yemen context, is let's go back to the soldiers on the border by Ukraine. If their cities are destroyed from within, where are those soldiers going to run? They can't run east because that's Russia. They can't go north because that's the Arctic. They can't go south because that's the Atlantic, and that's where all the chaos is going to be. The only direction they can run is south. So, they're going to run south. Mikutel, from the massacres. So either means that they're going to run away in fear of being massacred, and that's where they're going to be killed. Another pshat is they are going to be punished because of the massacres they supported against the Eden. And another way of looking at it is they will run away from the fear of being blamed for a massacre. That's why they're not hitting the Houthis too hard, because they're afraid that the world is going to say, oh, look at that. The Jews are doing genocide, and now America's doing genocide also. So because they're so scared of this label, Mikutel, from the fear of a massacre, even before the massacre happens, they are going to panic, and they're going to run away, and they're going to be killed out in the process. Why will Edom be punished with utter annihilation? What is Edom? What is the inciting force that's going to cause Edom to end up in this point? Most powerful nation in the history of the world. What's going to set it off? Because of the Hamas against your brother Yaakov. So if you look inside by Pusuk Yid, my Hamas, and for me this is what clinched it for me, was how Targum touches the word Hamas. Pusuk Yid, my Hamas, my Chatoif. And anyone who's been following the news from the Israeli side is familiar with the word chatoif as meaning hostages. Mei Hamas, from the hostages. But the Novi himself is going to clarify what the Hamas is. We don't need to rely only on the Targum. So, Mei Hamas uchichu Yaakov, because of the Hamas against your brother Yaakov, what's going to be your you'll be covered in humiliation until you are wiped out forever. We're 2 years and a couple of weeks past October 7th. And the one thing that is still that still hasn't phased out is the protests across major Western countries. You're still seeing 250,000, 500,000 protesters. And who are these protesters? They're a combination of the migrants and the Anshe Shlemechu. And they're going out and they're protesting. And every once in a while, some of them will test the limits. They'll try to see how far they can get away with. Just saw a couple of days ago in Brussels, where they shut down the entire Kratzmach market over there. They're trying to see how far they can go with this. Techaschu bishu, you will be covered in these protesters humiliating you in public with their all the garbage that they leave behind and all the spray paint. Techaschu bishu, you'll be covered in the stink of these protests. Until when? Until the day you're wiped out forever. And when is that day going to be? The day that the Shul is going to send around the message and say, today. And how are they going to know which day? How are they going to know when? Because they're going to get a type of Riach HaKodesh that they're going to be able to know today is the day to do it. Zuk de Klayeroi. Let's do this one side also. So on page Lamed Aleph, top of page Lamed Aleph, right column. Why will it be necessary for Edom to be completely wiped out to the point that there isn't a survivor? So So he says, "Bechamas chichu Yaakov techas bishu." This bishu will come from this chamas against the Eden. Because if you were only bad, like doing a virus against the Eibush, it wouldn't be necessary for the Eibush to wipe them out entirely. But to be on the side of the Hamas against the Jews, you'll be covered in Bisha, and la'ayin koil, to everybody's in a way that everybody sees, sheyuvini hakoil, that the entire world will realize and acknowledge, avir haChamas shel Yaakov Yizah, that this was a direct result of the Hamas against the Eden. It sounds like he's saying that the events of the Hamas Uchichu Yaakov are going to set off the chain reaction that will be unmistakably connected one to the other, and that will lead to the destruction of Edom. So, if these protesters one day commit 1,000 October 7ths across major Western cities, everyone will know that if not for October 7th, this would have never happened. And so this is what he said. It seems to be saying over here. Okay. So what is Mechamas Achichu Yaakov? Zuk the Nuvi. Nuvi is going to explain exactly what this Hamas is going to look like. The day you, Edom, stood against the Jewish people. And then Edom's like, day? What day? What are you talking about? Look at this press release by Biden's U.S. ambassador to the UN. First, look at the date. September 21st. It's 16 days before October 7th. And then the part that's highlighted. It's like this. In 2023 alone, the United States has contributed more than $296 million to UNRWA, and the Biden administration has contributed nearly $1 billion since 2021. I encourage other member states to step up and make the financial commitments needed to fund UNRWA through the end of the year. They're bragging 16 days before October 7th that they sent $1 billion to Hamas through UNRWA. And then from October 7th until the end of his term, another $1 billion. The biggest funders of Hamas was the United States under Joe Biden, and the second biggest was Europe, and then third was Iran, who got their money from the United States under Joe Biden. Well, if you realize that this is how the story was meant to play out, it doesn't make it boil anymore. But yeah, my blood boiled until this was all clarified. So, the day you stood against him, which day? The day that foreigners took his people hostage. Chayloi could mean his soldiers, Chayloi could mean his groups of people, and Chayloi could mean possessions. It's translated as all three. We know how all three actually played out. They stole the bicycles even. Now the B'nai Tzachar says that is a reference to the first Beis HaMikdash, where Edom stood on the side and waited for Buvel to do the dirty work, and then they came in and killed out and plundered. B'yom Shavoi Zurim Chayloi is a reference to the second Beis HaMikdash, which Edom was directly involved in. And strangers will break down his walls, and they will frame it like a mad gamble to liberate Yerushalayim. You too were just like them. On October 7th itself, there were already protests against Israel. On that afternoon, there were already anti-Israel protests that very same day. So, the day your people stood up against them, and you see all of the protests are only, all of them are in Western countries. You don't see them in Islamic countries. You don't see them in China. You don't see them anywhere else. You only see them in Western countries. Why? Because Edom are the only ones that are meant to be destroyed through this. Okay, we're going to do one more Klai Elohim inside, and then we're gonna go through the rest a little bit more quickly, simply because it's stuff that hasn't happened yet, and we don't know. We'll find out soon enough, and then we'll get to the fun part about the big reveal about Gog U'magog. Okay. So, Zukte Klai Royim on page Lamed Aleph. V'uma techaschu bishu. What is it techaschu bishu? Kizeh darkem shel b'nai Edom. This is how Edom operates. Misnage barumu. They operate deceitfully. Ke'ili ha-Hamas ois misrul aina mehem. As if they have plausible deniability, and the Hamas that is being carried out against the Jews has nothing to do with them. Avol hiya kol batsusam are really there behind all of it. UNRWA masquerades as a legitimate Western entity. It's Edom creating a money laundering scheme to help the Hamas. And he says this is what they did by the first Beis HaMikdash also. And at first it's not outwardly obvious that Edom is behind the Hamas. It's like, what do you mean? They're Yishmul. But where did they get all their funding from? Where do they get the moral authority to keep going? Because they see the protests in Western countries, and then leaders of Western countries make announcements like, we're going to support a Palestinian state, and Hamas says, great, I don't have to negotiate with Israel anymore. No problem. So everything they get, all of their power and all of their funding comes from the West. And if you want to say Qatar and some of the other Muslim countries, no, they're there. They're not building universities and hospitals to help the people of Gaza. They're there. They're building these institutions so they could also chop money from the West. Okay. And now he gives a bunch of warnings of what Edom should not do after this Hamas. Edom says, okay, fine, you got me. Okay, so maybe I sent some humanitarian aid by mistake. What do you want me to do now? He says, don't look at your brother on the day his people are uprooted. Don't rejoice when Yehida suffers their day of loss. Don't open your mouth on this day of distress. Don't enter the gates of my people. Shad Ami could also be translated as Shad is judiciary Ami of nations, the courts of nations. Don't bring them to the courts of nations b'yom Aidam, on this day of catastrophe. Al Taira Atem Re'usoi b'yom Aidam. Don't join in the evil. Don't lay your hand on his possessions. Maybe this is referring to BDS. Don't boycott the Western sanction. Don't reach out for his possessions. Don't stand in the middle of the way to cut down the fugitives. That when Isav is going to see, Isav Rushu, page Lamed Gimel, bottom left, when he sees the success of Israel, as they're knocking out nation after nation, I want to kiss up to them. And join them and fight wars together with them. It'll stand in the middle of the road to cut down those who are fleeing. Who are they? Perhaps we can understand this if you remember the red line that Joe Biden put on Rafah, and how many times that Israel was forced into an unfavorable ceasefire agreement when they appeared to be on the verge of a big breakthrough, and then Edom said, stop, you can't go further. Don't stand in the middle of the way when they're about to wipe out their enemies. Let them finish the job. Don't keep his people hostage, locked up on this day of distress. Because a day fast approaches against all the nations. You'll be treated mida exactly how you tried to wipe out the Jews. That's how you yourself will be wiped out. The Medrash talks about this big koishel perunios that every nation of Edom has, and every time they harmed the Jews, the pain was extracted from the event and deposited into this koishel perunios and usid luvoi. Every nation will have to drink their own kois, and they will be rapidly destroyed in the same manner that they tried to destroy the Eden. So look at Europe right now. The nations that had the biggest assimilation rate, the nation that most Eden were lost due to assimilation, are right now being out-assimilated. The nations that caused the pogroms didn't have a track record of assimilation, but look what's happening in Ukraine and Russia right now. So Every nation is going to be destroyed exactly the way they tried to destroy the Yidden. Veshusi velui v'hoyi keloi hoyi, they will drink, they'll be consumed, and they will be wiped out of existence as if they never were. Sounds nuclear a little bit. The Netzach says they will, even the survivors will lose their national identity. They're no longer going to identify as part of a nation anymore. In Eretz Yisrael there will be a place of refuge. This is the Pusik quoted by many of the Gedolim over the decades. Whenever there was a problem in Eretz Yisrael, they said the Beharatzi and Tia Pleite. Haratzi and Tia Pleite v'hoya kodesh. So people say, what was behind that question at the White House about the Beis HaMikdash? Is that also in Ovadia? Of course. V'hoya kodesh means that Har HaBayis is going to become heilig once again. V'hoyu kodesh v'yarshi Beis Yaakov es moiru sheihem. And Beis Yaakov, which is attached to the Ehrlich Yidden, the Yidden who are sitting in the tent learning Torah, are going to yarshin that which was always meant to be theirs. V'yarshi Beis Yaakov es moiru sheihem. Some touch it as it means a massive movement of Tshiva. It could mean that they're going to take over the government and transform it into something that's a little bit more beneficial to the kind of future that the Torah describes. We'll find out in due time. Judicial reform in Israel is in Tzfania. Tzfania mentions two big problems that are going to be plaguing Klal Yisrael before this Yom Charoin Af Hashem, which seems to be a reference to October 7th, because he says after this Yom Charoin Af Hashem, Gaza is going to be, the population of Gaza will be expelled and the Yidden are going to settle there. And so he says, Bakshi Tzedek, Bakshi Anuva. The two of the defining characteristics of the Tziyonim is Gava and injustice. And he says, Bakshi Tzedek, Bakshi Anuva, Ilai Tisasri B'yoim Charoin Af Hashem. Maybe that's going to save you on this day of Charoin Af Hashem. And we know that, like, we have family friends in Kibbutz Sad. Kibbutz Sad is across the street from Be'eri. Mamash across the street. I was there. Not a single person in Kibbutz Sad was killed. And Kibbutz Sad is a Firbe kibbutz. And, so he does mention that. That's not in Ovadia, that's in Tzfania. There are altogether half a dozen Nevi'im that talk about what's going to happen to the Plishtim before Mashiach. And so Tzfania is one of them. Umos talks about it. Yecheskel, Yemi, of course. And Ovadia is going to mention the Plishtim very soon. It's going to be that Beis Yaakov is going to be a fire, Beis Yosef is going to be a lehuva, a flame that shoots out of the fire. It's interesting that you never see anywhere in Tanakh that it designates Klal Yisrael into two groups, Beis Yaakov and Beis Yosef, as two separate classes of Yidden. So he says that Kemat every time it says Beis Yosef, it's talking about the Yidden who are Ovadia Zura. And Beis Yaakov, means Ehrlich Yidden. So he speculates. No, Beis Yosef is Ovadia Zura Yidden. Because he says that in Tanakh, whenever it says Beis Yosef, it doesn't say Beis Yaakov and Beis Yosef together, but when it talks about Beis Yosef, it almost always is talking about the Yidden who were Ovadia Zura, because that's Yisrael, Malchus Yisrael. They worship the Baal and the Getchkes that Yerovim put up. So he says Beis Yosef ends up being the Ovadia Zura Yidden. So he speculates that there will be some kind of a resolution to a conflict between the Beis Yaakov, the Ehrlich Yidden, and the Beis Yosef, the Yidden who are estranged from Yiddishkeit. Yes, of course. So that's another pshat. Yes, of course. So another pshat is Beis Yaakov, the Yidden who are sitting and learning Torah with Mesiris Nefesh, and Beis Yosef, the Ehrlich Yidden who are fighting on the battlefield with Mesiris Nefesh. Is another way of looking at it. But either way, The bottom line is that Beis Yaakov and Beis Yosef are going to come together ba'achdus, and each one is going to respect the Mesiris Nefesh of the other one. And he says, V'hayu, it's going to happen. The question is, how many messages are we going to have to receive before that actually happens? It's going to happen. Are we going to need more patch, or are we going to figure out solutions on our own? So, what's going to happen when Beis Yaakov is Aish and Beis Yosef is Lehuva? Then Beis Eisav Lekash. Eisav becomes like straw, just like straw. You light one piece and the rest of the heap shoots up in flame. So too, V'dol Kibuhem, they will ignite. V'achlam, and they will be devoured. V'lo Yisrid Beis Eisav Keshem Diber, there will not be there will not remain an influencer of the culture of Eisav. Beis Eisav means the culture of Eisav, Oisa Masa Eisav. The Toiv Sheba Eisav, the good goyim, are going to survive. It's interesting to consider how Kemat, all of the evil of Eisav is concentrated in urban cities, and the Toiv Sheba Eisav is more concentrated in the rural areas. The ones that are more biblical, the ones that are more likely to support Tetzis Yisrael are the ones in the urban areas. The rural areas. The ones in the big cities are most likely to be the ones that are anti-Israel. So the Toiv Sheba Eisav and the Ra Sheba Eisav, this is Kabbalah stuff. I'm only 39, so can't get too deep into it. But no, the idea is that Eisav is Umais talks about the Leman Yishya Sha'iris Edom. There will be a remnant of Edom that's going to survive. There will be the people who are going to point up and say, the good goyim are going to survive. They're going to see the miracles. And then there's Oilu Rush Oilu Scheiner. The Yidden who do Tshiva are going to be fine. Edom, the good ones, are going to survive. The bad ones are going to be wiped out in this chain of events that is going to start from Mechamas Yaakov, but really starts decades earlier when they allowed the Ganuvim and Shoy Delilah to the country. So this is to where I got to. I didn't finish yet. So I wasn't joking when I said this is the first group that I'm unveiling this to. Hanegev is a euphemism for Yishmul. He says he doesn't mention Yishmul by name because the entire Nevi'ah is exclusively about Edom, but Negev could be translated as the south. V'yarshi Negev, he says he's not going to Yarshin the Negev as Har Eisav and Har Eisav. That means they're going to Yarshin Yishmul and Edom and the entire Har Eisav, which is a coalition of all the nations in the world. So if you want to look at it as the geographical Har Eisav, he mentions 5 territories. Yes. He mentions 5 territories that are currently not in Jewish hands, that he says after the war are going to become Jewish. Okay? Har Eisav, that's the tip of Jordan, the border area over there. V'yoshe Negev Har Eisav. V'hashvayla es ha-Plishtim. The Yidden of the Shvayla are going to Yarshin, the lands of the Plishtim. Zukte b'nai Yissaschar. That the Plishtim, and let's go back a couple of pashas. He asks a question that what's the pusik right before Akaides Yitzchak? What is the last pusik before Akaides Yitzchak? The pusik right before Shishi. Vayugar Avruam be'eret Plishtim yumam rabim. He says, we keep the saran. I'm getting ready for the Heilige Akaides Yitzchak. You tell me Avrum lived in the land of the Plishtim. Rashi Shasbeki Cheshboinis, he lived there for 26 years, but maybe more. Why do we need to know that Avrum lived there? It's Plishtim Yom Rabim Zukte b'nai Yissaschar like this. But the Bris Ba'an Absurim, the Eibishter shows Avrum Avini all the gulas that they're going to suffer, and during that, he says Rabim is Rusha Taivis, Roim, Buvel, Yuvon, Mudai. The Eibishter showed him by each of the 4 guliyos, the Yidden are going to suffer at the hands of the Plishtim. Each of the 4 guliyos are going to suffer from the Plishtim. We know when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, by the Chorban, first and second by Samikdash, refugees that ended up too close to the Plishtim territories were rounded up and killed, and we were never able to get rid of the Plishtim. So Avram Avinu looks at the Plishtim and says, their power is unbelievable. They have a strong spiritual protection. What is the source of that protection? He says the word Plishtim is a gematria 10 times Elohim. The significance of that is that you have the 10 spheres. Elohim is Midas Adin. Because of gematria 10 times Elohim, they're able to overcome din on every level of sphere. Whatever that means. Ask me again when I'm 40. They're able to overcome din on every level of sphere, with one exception. He says the only thing that is able to overcome the Plishtim is the power of Gevira Yitzchak. What was the day on which Hamas signed the surrender agreement? It was on Yitzchak's Spisen. It was the second day of Sikkos that Hamas signed the agreement that they will be releasing the hostages within 72 hours. And Sinwar was killed on the first day of Yom Tov, yes. And he talks about it as well. So he says, the only exception, so he says that only Yitzchak is able to overcome the Plishtim, except when there's a Maitzer Yisrul. Maitzer Yisrul means someone who causes a tremendous amount of pain to the Yidden. So he says, usually what happens is when Midas Adin is supposed to go into effect against someone, Chesed shows up and starts arguing, and Chesed says, you don't understand, put yourself in his position, give him another chance. But when it comes to a Maitzel Yisrul, Chesed shows up a day earlier and says, Gvira, we're not waiting for you, let me take care of this today on my day. Azoy Zukter on Pusik Tes, Leman Yikuris Ish Ma'ar Eis of Mikutel. He says, who is the Ish going on? He says, it's a reference, and that is on page, page Chuftes, the last piece on page Chuftes, Zukter Lepume Midas Achesed eine Baskumis Lasses din Rakshal Yidar Avoin Israb Yeshes Gabes Mitzedin Azai Afo das Kumis Einkam mit der Chesed Maskem Ledin. Oya Maitzirim Li Yisrul, someone who causes a lot of distress to the Eden, he gets taken out in the Schis of Chesed. And so Taka Sinwar was killed on the first day of Sikkos, and Hamas signed the surrender agreement a year later on the second day of Sikkos in Yitzchak's in the Schis of Yitzchak. Zukte B'nai Saschir in the Agre Dekale on Parshas V'Wairu. He says the Eibush showed in the Plishtim causing problems in each of the four Guliyos. And Avram Avinu said, how is this possible? How are we able to overcome them? And the Eibush said, let's fit you around Akaides Yitzchak, and Akaides Yitzchak will grant you the protection. What have the Muslims been doing ever since Israel declared a country? They're killing themselves. They're trying to counter this Chesed Akaides Yitzchak. Avrun said, Hashem, are my people going to have enough chisim to be able to overcome such a powerful nation? And the Rebbe says, yes, Akaides Yitzchak will be there for you. The Sarshi Shmuel knows this, and he tells his people, guys, go, kill yourself, kill your families, do it. Show Allah that you have more Mesiras Nefesh than the Eden. Maybe we'll still have a chance, and we'll be able to get Yisrael back. So, Vashfailas Aplishtim, the Yoshi is the Ephraim, the Shomroin, Ibn Yuman as Agilad. So these are 5 specific territories that are currently in Arab hands. I'm sorry? Judea. So he already, Sedai Ephraim is geographically where Judea. Sedai Shomron is higher up. So Ephraim will be Judea. My guess would be, because he already mentions Benai Yehida B'Yom Avdam, and if you look at a map of Eretz Yisrael, you'll see that the entire October 7th took place in the Chalk of Yehida. The farthest extent that Hamas made it to was Ofakim, which is on the border of Shimon. So he already talks about Yehida as where the event is going to unfold. Yoel also talks about the Hamas Hu'uretz against Yehida. Okay. For Gulas Achai Lazeh Livnai Yisrael, Gulas Achai Lazeh, the Gulas that didn't even start yet. Think of how Ovadia lived 200 years before Yemiyah, before the Churban Beis Hamikdash. He says, the Gulas Achai Lazeh Livnai Yisrael, the Gulas of Bnai Yisrael that didn't even start yet, that's about to unfold, is going to end. He says, there will be a Gulas one day, and that's going to end in the far off future. The Gulas Achai Lazeh Livnai Yisrael. So, Zukta Benel, something unbelievable. And it mamish opened my eyes to a lot of the events that otherwise don't make any sense. He says, the Aseres HaShvutim, a lot of the Aseres HaShvutim are going to come back as soldiers from other armies, and they're going to defeat our enemies for us, and they are going to have like mamish nisim with how they're going to wipe out our enemies. Who do you think he might be referring to, knowing what we know now in the news? ISIS? What's the Rosh Hashanah of ISIS? Ayin Shein? I don't know. They call themselves Daesh. Aseres Shvutim maybe? I don't know. Who did ISIS target? I'll tell you who ISIS didn't target. They didn't target, never targeted Israel. But you know who they did wipe out? They wiped out Edom communities, their own communities, but they never attacked Yidden. They attacked every other country, but not at Yisrael. Look at Syria. Look at the Shalom B'derech HaTeva that the Syrians had in wiping out Assad and Russia in just 11 days. And where did those soldiers all come from? They came from all over the world. Perhaps there's some Aseres HaShvutim within it. Not to say that ISIS is an Aseres HaShvutim or that Julani, all this, but there definitely is an element of Shalom B'derech HaTeva with the kinds of successes that they had. And it could plausibly be that there are Aseres HaShvutim intermingled with them. This is what the Abenel says is going to happen, and we're seeing that happen. So it very likely is what he's talking about. But even if not, it doesn't change the context of Gulas Achai Lazeh Livnai Yisrael Asher Kananim at Tzarfas. Zuktim Nai Tzarfas Asher Kananim, that Nebuch, you can't differentiate them from Kananim. Understand? Asher Kananim at Tzarfas. The Gulas Yerushalayim Asher B'Sfurad. He's specifically highlighting Sfurad and Tzarfas as two types of Yidden and Gulas more than a millennium before those countries were even founded and named. He says there will be a type of Yid who's going to get lost in Paris. And then there will be another type of Yid who's going to be lost in a place like Spain, wanting to hold on to Yiddishkeit and not being able to. And then there will be a Yid who has a period of weakness and he ends up in the fashion capital of the world. And these are the two types of Yidden that are lost to Klal Yisrael, and they're going to come back. Agav, Tzarfas has the largest Jewish community in Chitz L'Uretz after America. Talking about 600,000 Jews living in France. 600,000 Jews coming back from Gulas. We're talking about the Tzis Mitzrayim numbers. Yirshi Surya Negev. And the last Pusik, Uli Moshiach Behar Tzion Mashiach Ben Yosef Mashiach Ben David. Some say Moshiach is plural for Mashiach, or Mashiach could be the B'nai Moshe. Are going to ascend Har Tzion Lishboit as Har Isav, to judge Har Isav. Who's Har Isav? The entire entity that represents every nation of the world. They're all on the record. How they voted against the Yidden every single time for the past 80 years. And even when they voted to give Eretz Yisrael back to us, they only gave us half. And they, to this day, do you know that the UN still recognizes Yerushalayim as theirs? They never acknowledged that Yerushalayim belongs to Yisrael. So, Lishpot is Har Isav, to judge is Har Isav v'hoisu l'Hashem hamlichu. Okay, we're going to take some questions, and then we're going to get to the very, very fun clickbaity part about Gog. We'll get to that. hopefully we're going to be responsible and turn off the audio so that I don't have to get into trouble prematurely. But let's take some questions before we get to that. Yeah, so Mendel Zintenstagzan is under the impression that if someone tells Trump what his mission is, that Trump is going to chap and he's going to carry out his shlichus. And until then, he might be making some mistakes that could have devastating consequences. My feeling is that every time you can get too comfortable, the Eibishter, and we become too reliant on Trump, the Eibishter sends us a reminder. So I don't think anything needs to be done differently except each for ourselves in our own life to try to improve ourselves. And it's going to sound very cheesy, but and the Eibishter is giving us time. He's giving us a chance. So if you are that neighbor from Noach in the previous Gilgal who's like, you're doing this for 70 years already. Like, hello, you're still stuck in that same trip from when you were a teenager? Like, what's wrong with you? Snap out of it. And he's like, I don't know. The Eibishter is giving you more time to do tshuva. That's this period right now. The Eibishter is giving us time to do tshuva. Okay? Because when this day happens where they're going to, where Yishmael is going to wipe out Edom, it's going to be very hard to do tshuva mehava at that point. You're only going to be able to do tshuva meyira. It's going to be chamash eser yamaya fayla. He brings down from Zoyer. Chamash eser yamaya fayla, 15 days of darkness. Maybe a communication blackout. Maybe someone's going to knock out the electric grid, and there will literally be no technology. He says all the chachmas hachitzonis are going to come to an end. So when that happens, Zukter, and he also says an interesting thing. He says you'll see a lot of Yidden are going to join the side of our enemies, and they're going to become a kli chumas against the Yidden. And the reason is, he says, these are the Erev Rav, and when the Eibishter wipes out our enemies, he will wipe out the Erev Rav together with them. So the world will be dark. This way, just like by Mitzrayim, our enemies are not going to see as the Erev Rav gets wiped out. But when this happens, he says, you're only going to be able to do tshuva meyira by then. You will not be able to do tshuva mehava anymore. So do tshuva mehava before that day comes, so that you're mesider. Okay? No, it's not wrong. He's saying you're not going to have the option to do tshuva mehava. Right now, you have a choice. Yeah. That is the Edom that we're focusing on. Mm-hmm. They are the Edom. They are the Edom that the Navi is talking about. The Navi is talking about the Edom of Europe. The Edom that tried to wipe us out for the last 1,000 years. No. Russia's part of Edom. Russia's part of Edom. Russia is part of the Edom that's going to be destroyed. That is actively being destroyed. They lost over, they say, 1.25 million soldiers. You know what kind of an effect that has on a country that's already been rapidly declining in population? So, when we talk about Edom, there is the Tov Sheba Edom and the Ra Sheba Edom. The part of Edom that does tshuva, which we hope is America. The part of Edom that is doomed to fail because of it. You look at France and the UK, I mean, blood libels, 1,000 years of expulsions, persecutions. They can't do tshuva for that, right? Hopefully America is still able to redeem itself. But America is not, it can't expect to get away unscathed. When the Navi says, Bahar Tzi and Tia Plata, it's at the exclusion of everybody else. So, Edom is specifically referring to, in fact, we know that Yerushalayim can't be reestablished with full glory until Rome is completely destroyed. So we're going to see right now some of the biggest protests have been occurring in Rome. You also have the docks, the Roman ports that have been very instrumental in facilitating the flotillas. There's a Pirkei de Belezer that seems to suggest that the next major war is going to happen at the sea. So maybe a flotilla of 1,000 boats and Hamas launching an attack against the Navy, maybe in conjunction with the Houthis. The Israeli Navy isn't as powerful as their Air Force and their ground troops, so it's plausible. Could happen. He says the next one's going to be in the sea, and then the final phase says 3 wars of Mehima, 3 wars of terror will be waged by Yishmael against Edom. And the third one will be Krach Gudel Shabaroimi. Yes. No, Rome has to be wiped out. Yirmiyah describes the destruction as like Sdom and Amorah across the entire Edom. He says people are going to shriek when they see the totality of destruction of the of the largest capital cities of Edom, as they lay completely desolate and empty of humanity. So there will be good people. I don't think that's referring to the Vatican. You see how anti-Israel the current Pope is, the previous Pope, he called Gaza every couple of days. I mean, there are massacres taking place against Christians on a daily basis, and the Pope has nothing to say about it. But he has everything to say about Gaza, where there are like 11 Christian families living there. I mean, that's his only focus, right? So yeah, the papacy has definitely taken its, and you know why? You know why they're so anti-Israel? Because to them, for 2,000 years, they've been saying that the biggest proof that Hashem abandoned the Jewish nation is because we are. It's proven by the fact that we were kicked out of Eretz Yisrael, and they said that we are never going to have control over Eretz Yisrael ever again. This was the core machlokes between the Catholic prophets and our Nevi'im. Well, that's why they didn't recognize Israel until fairly recently. So they've always ideologically been opposed to us, and in practicality they're opposed to us. So we know which side they're on. Where? The punchline? We'll get to the punchline. Okay, let's segue to the... Yeah. Yes. What do you mean? There's still nothing. Jordan also is part of Jordan that's Amoin, part that's Moav. Jordan is not just the single, it's not just Edom, it's a small part. Oh, that's what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. I mean, we'll see. According to Ummah, Jordan is going to destroy itself in a civil war. So we'll see when that happens. Yes. The following week, a Congress member from New York's 24th District introduced a resolution recognizing Harabayas in Congress, but that was still the shutdown. Yeah, but that was like the following week. Let's see what happens. Look, all he has to do is just say that he recognizes Harabayas as ours. I mean, essentially, the Rishonim say that Edom destroyed the Beis Mikdash. Edom has to enable us to rebuild it. Not that they have to build it or fund it. We'll take care of all that ourselves. But they have to give us permission to rebuild it. Just like Kodesh gave us permission. Yes? He's late to the game. He saw that there's a lot. You want to be successful, and you're a guy, becoming anti-Semit. This is, Titus already recognized this. So he wants to be successful. He figured out a pathway to becoming successful. Yeah, it's a grift. It's a geherige grift with him. That's an interesting question. Why should we assume that this matuna had any kind of long-term effect? Zyashka. I thought it was a joke. I don't know. Okay, next. Yeah? The heche? So there's a Pirkei Belazed that says that what happened to the original Edom, the survivors of the original Edom, he says that when Sancheriv came, he took the survivors of Edom and he mixed them together with 9 other nations. And he spread them all across the region. And so kapitel Pai Gimel. Ole Edom Bishma'ilem, Moya Vahagrim, Gevol Va'amen Amulek, Pleshes Mir Shveitzoy, that's 9, V'gam Asher Nil V'muam, that's 10. So within these nations, there's the survivors of Edom. They married into Yishmael. Zuk the Pirkei Belazed, Parik Mem Daled, if you want to look it up, the end. So he says, V'amulek nichnas lemidbar v'nis arvi in B'nai Yishmael. The Amulekim, who were the grandsons of Esav, pure, authentic, unadulterated, unadulterated or unadulterated. And they mingled in with Yishmael. So yes, in that context, there was Edom that mixed in with Yishmael. You know who else mixed in with Yishmael? So there was Edom, there was Amulek, and there the Plishtim. So in Gaza and in the West Bank and in the whole region, you have these 10 nations, plus whichever other occupying nations came since then. But within these nations, you have some Plishtim, you have some Amulekim, you have some Edomim, you have some Yishmaelim, and they're all mixed together. And no one knows who's who, but you can tell who the terrorists are. You know the terrorists are from those hardcore they have no ambitions over Eretz Yisrael. They don't really factor in to this particular Nevi'ah. Maybe they're part of the coalition of Gog U'magog that wipes out Edom. Who knows? Okay, anybody else? Right. So Amen and Moav were 2 of the 10 nations. Yes, that's correct. Okay. Okay, last question, and then we're going to get to the final part. I believe Tufrash Aleph, I think. Yeah. Right. Of course. So one thing we can all agree on is that it couldn't have been talking exclusively about the past, because then the story would have finished already. So the fact that we're still living in the story leads to one of two conclusions. Either that this is it right now, or maybe it's describing events that are actually going to unfold in 100 years from now and we didn't even scratch the surface. Well, if it's going to be in 100 years from now, then let those people worry about it then. I can't worry on their behalf. I can only look at what's happening today and try to make sense of what's happening today. It's possible it might take another very long time until it... Yes, I understand your question, and not just that, a lot of these things, even from 2 years ago to today, a lot of these things have taken greater relevance the more time goes on. So yes, it's very possible. It's very possible. But at least you'll know all that time, you'll know why these things are happening, and you'll be able to sense the patterns. Well, okay, so let me share with you my my theory on Gog, and if this taka plays out, we can assume that we're very, very close to that part of the process. So here's the part where we mute the audio. So